Yes, it is. All right, let's shake things up. Let's get into our discussion for this week, John. And the discussion for this week is the future of superhero cinemas. So we have a couple big movies coming up. We had one that just recently came out with Captain America: Brave New World. We have Superman, Fantastic Four, whatnot. And I think things are shifting quite a bit. Is there any tonal shifts that you're seeing out of the next crop of superhero movies from even the last 10 years of what we had?
Yeah. So what I believe we saw over the last 10 years or so, superhero movies started when we were kids, targeting us as the youth. I don't think there was much. I mean, there was the old Batman and Superman, very old, low tech, not even really in comparison, but that was for a previous generation. Actual, putting money behind it and expecting good results was our generation, and really a new generation started with the Iron Man 1 movie came out. Then it snowballed from there. They saw how profitable that can be, and a lot of money started getting put into superhero movies. But I think we're getting to a point now where there's going to be a divide. We're starting to see movies that are made for the next generation, a younger generation, but still good, new, full action, I guess, movies that seem to be following, our older taste now that we're becoming, older adults and not in our 20s or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, movies like Shazam is a good example. That's like, yeah, that's cute and all, but that's for the 12-year-olds or 15-year-olds. I'm probably not going to go watch that in theaters, but, we still have, I don't know, all the MCU stuff, which is debatable, I guess. The MCU itself is really good, but it could be kind of seen as still trying to target the younger audience and not moving forward. Whereas I think we're seeing kind of DC decided we're going to take that little edgier, older audience route and, not stay targeting the teens, but we're going to move into the edgier, darker stuff that can be targeting the, 30, 40, 50-year-olds or whatever.
Yeah. I think with the last 10 years, especially with the MCU, I think they were going for that 4 quadrants, right? Where you have you take your grandma and you could take your kids and everybody's going to at least enjoy the fireworks. Yeah. And then with DC, for sure, they had that edgier kind of like, we're just going to put everything in a dark tone. But I think for both Fantastic Four and Superman, we're seeing this shift into hopefulness that they can inspire us for a better future. I mean, with Fantastic Four specifically, Shackman had a lot of work on that. Matt Shackman, who does a lot of the Star Trek stuff, so you could see that Star Trek influence in there. There is a way for us to figure this all out, and not everything has to be dystopian, like the end of the DCEU would be. So I do look forward to that, but I do want to bring up how you were talking about how there's these shifts, like these eras of superhero movies, and it reminds me of I just recently watched the 1978 Superman movie for Challenge Accepted. And then when that worked really well, they did a lot of sequels to it. And then they decided, we could do a Batman movie too and put money behind it. And again, go for the adults in the room too, not just the kids. Suddenly we had Michael Keaton Batman. And those were working well, but they kind of got sillier and sillier as time went on. And then you had Mystery Men kind of even making fun of how silly they all are. But then, boom, here comes Iron Man. Like you said, and there's a whole new thing. I think what we're seeing is that next tonal shift. And I think it's going to be more aspirational and not so gritty. Christopher Nolan's Batman wouldn't fit in this next Batman's world because he's so dark, gritty, and the most hopeful thing he did was apparently died to all of Gotham. Gotham thinks he dies, and then he just retires. And I was that's a hopeful ending. But that's not the hopeful ending that we really want for our characters. And it won't be what we see in the future. I think that's going to be shifting. And then there's the impact on streaming of everything before, a Batman movie came out once every few years. Now we have, 2 Batman or 2 DC movies and the animated versions or the TV shows and stuff like that. So I think we have a problem with things getting a little oversaturated. Do you think that's something that they'll have to address?
Yeah, I think our entertainment industry as a whole is shifting because we talk about it almost every time we talk about a movie on here.
Yeah, we do.
It's that'd be great as a miniseries, or so much stuff we watch now is a series. Yeah, I mean, I can't think of anybody else but Game of Thrones that really hit it out of the park. Where it's oh man, that's such a good. Each episode is like a movie, but I can watch it at home week after week, and everybody's talking about it around the water cooler. So it's if they can do that with all these stories, it seems like it would just be more profitable for them to do it that route versus pump a ton of money into marketing and try to get people to show up in theaters. Because sometimes it's a home run, and sometimes it's a big flop, and they lose $100 million in the process. So I feel like I don't know, but I feel like animated or a mini series or a full length series, if possible, is more like a safer bet, I think, for these stories moving forward in the future.
I think they're a place where they could explore things too. Like Moon Knight might not be something that translates well on the big screens, but it did great as a series until the final episode. Miss Marvel too, like you need her to have time to kind of like learn her abilities that might not look good on screen, on the big screen.
I think something like Stranger Things would not have been it wouldn't have been the same thing if you watched it as a movie. You would have had to watch probably 3 movies to get the story that we got or more.
Yeah.
But it was such a great series to watch.
What about the connectedness of all these universes? And then again, bringing that to that series aspect versus the movies aspect, is that hurting or helping? Like when we had those standalone films, Kazam back in the day, or Steel, both Shaq movies, but like these are just standalone movies that stuck with us for so long. The Spawn movie, there's one that's not Shaq. But if that Spawn movie were to come out today, you bet your ass there'd be multiple of them, and then there would be the standalone Violator movie all about this killer clown, and like they would have forced it to connect because it's like, oh, that's just good. Do you think that's something that's hurting movies or helping the future of superhero movies?
To me, it's hurting. I mean, we know that MCU's had a lot of success with it. The Endgame and everything is huge moneymakers for them. But that being said, I think you can only have so many gods in one room before they all lose their power. If everybody in the room is the smartest man in the room, then everybody in the room's dumb because they're no smarter than the guy next to him. Mm-hmm. So, I remember talking about this with Thor years back when I think it was Thor 2 came out. But it's like in Thor 1, he goes from being this kind of punk college kid, not taking life serious, to having the integrity of a god, that he deserves the power to wield his hammer.
Yeah.
And that's so awesome that he, built, we got to see his character grow into the character that he is in the comic books and that we want him to be and stuff. At least I say in the comic books. I haven't read them, so I don't know.
I've read a lot of them, so I agree with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then in the following movies, he's a laughingstock again, and he's just the bro who's kind of joking around, and they're trying to make him the funny one. It's like, well, no, he's supposed to be the regal, godly character who, knows his North Star never moves, kind of thing. So he knows exactly what's right and wrong, or he's very decisive. But because he's amongst other people too, other gods, other superheroes, then they all have to have their place and their dynamic and stuff, and he can't just be the biggest and the strongest. And then, you do that with all of them. I mean, you bring in Hulk, and then there's got to be somebody that can fight Hulk, and you bring in Captain America. Well, there's got to be somebody that can, catch his shield, or there's got to be somebody else that can pick up Thor's hammer. And it just all makes everybody weaker by putting them together, in my mind.
You're also like forcing stories to happen, right? Like if you're going to bring in a rule, like only Thor could pick up the hammer, only somebody as worthy as Thor to pick up the hammer. That's like the Chekhov's gun in the MCU. Somebody's picking up that damn hammer. Now, did it create my absolute favorite moment in all of cinema? Yes. Right. But when Captain America picks up that hammer, I lose it still today. But nevertheless, like you're forcing things to happen. There are all kinds of times where that happens. Yeah. And
now, I love connectivity within the same story, the same world. Like when we see the Batman Gotham City, all the different stuff that happens with Batman, and then we want to see a one-off show of Catwoman, or a movie about Catwoman. That's awesome. And then like the
Penguin
HBO series we have with Penguin, it's like those are great. Those can all be interconnected, and I want to see the shadow of Batman in the background. You don't even have to bring him in, but I want to know that he's in the city also. But you don't need to all of a sudden Batman goes out into space and finds that Superman has a space station somewhere. It's like, whoa, hey, you don't need to connect the two, even though I'm sure they will eventually. But, you can have a superhero have a great story, great many stories with just the characters that are in his own comic books and not have to cross them all over.
Well, looking at the future of superhero cinema, I think that's where they're making a change. Because, again, before we had these forced connections, we had a hard time, putting like Thor in the comic books, whenever he does with the Avengers, one of the classic moves is like, oh shit, we might lose this one. Lightning bolt. Nope, we're going to win it now. Yeah. I love that about him. And he's got such good comics. Make sure you guys read them, Donny Cates. But with the future of him, I think we're seeing with like Daredevil, we're starting to see with this Fantastic Four, the fact that it's like in a different universe, basically, is they're letting them have their own standalone world. Like, let's go back to Moon Knight. you wouldn't know there's another superhero in the world in the Moon Knight stories until he like dies and they kind of reveal like, oh yeah, you could end up there or there. I think that's the way to go. And then going over to DC stuff like that, yeah, the way that Penguin had a whole show that at the end you were reminded that he's part of the Batman universe with the light. Worked great. And I'm fine with that. So I think that going forward, that might be something that they're trying to do is keep them connected. There can be crossovers. Not everything has to be crossovers. Last thing, Captain America Civil War, which was really just Avengers like 2.5. That one was like the peak of we have to make all the action figures hit each other and not tell a great story. And that's a shame because like that could have been an Avengers movie, first of all. And we lost out on a really good Captain America movie instead. So I think Marvel and especially in DC now have learned their lesson a little bit. I'm hoping they embrace that going forward.
Yeah, I think any crossovers too, they need to be that rare candy, that you know, ice cream for dinner kind of thing. Like you don't do that all the time. If you make it that like Daredevil's fighting and he just hears in the news that there's some masked man shooting spider webs, that's great. And just we just want to hear it in the background. And then maybe someday he gets a wisp of him swinging by and he's like, wait a minute, what was that? I think that's him, you know, and eventually Spider-Man does help him at some point or something like that. But it's like, don't just throw it all out there and hey, there's 10 superheroes in the same room. Let's fight 10 bad guys that happen to be there too. It's like, well, that's too much at once. Like, let us savor you know, the event and not just throw it all out there.
And the nods are delightful. Those little Easter eggs are delightful. I do want to keep hearing those. There should be no reason that Daredevil's watching the news and there's not mention of the Spider-Man flying around. One really deep cut that was in actually the latest episode of Daredevil is they mention Officer Morales, which is Miles Morales' dad, who, you know, so it's like, oh, that's cool. They actually mentioned Morales. You know, very, very much of an Easter egg. Probably even a deep cut, like maybe not even purposeful, but that was one of those things that was like, oh, it's rewarding the people who actually like to read the comics or know about, you know, other characters. That is as connected as it really needs to be to make me very happy. Then let's move on to how they've shifted over with the visual effects, because I think we're filming everything on the same damn green screen. We already know that Secret Wars and Doomsday, they're filming it right now. They're like, we don't have to worry about leaks because it's all on green screen. It's like, shit, that's too bad. Because there's something to those movies where they film them, like the Thunderbolts movie feels very much in world, right? That doesn't feel like it's heavily green screen and they're just punching each other. And I'm more hyped for that than I am for a lot of other things.
So are they using a lot of green screen in that too? Or can you not tell the difference when they're doing so much green screen now?
You can, yeah. Oh, you could still tell the difference when they're using a lot of green screen. I could tell it, like even with the Star Wars stuff, and or scenes does a really good job, and or when he's like in the middle of a city, a lot of that's green screen. But then when he's out on the side of the hills, whatever, those aren't, and you could just feel the difference. It's different lighting and stuff like that. While we've gotten far better at it, and more importantly for the studios, it's far cheaper now. You can still see the difference, and I think there is some value to having less CGI and more character-driven things. Think about it. Let's go back to Daredevil again. When they're in the courtroom debating the legitimacy of vigilantes and whether or not they mean good or bad, that has me on the edge of my seat just as much as watching a bunch of CGI Hulks fight each other.
Yeah,
and I think that we need to give those things their space.
Yeah. I think we should try to dial back the CGI as much as possible, especially when it's just the setting that they're in. I get getting people and equipment on set somewhere in New Zealand or whatever. That's not easy or cheap.
Right.
But like you're saying, I think it gives you so much more watching it. And I mean, the actor is actually in the space versus having to, you know, they'll feel the emotions of being next to a massive waterfall or something like that versus I'm in a room. It's literally all painted green.
Looking at a tennis ball. It's going to be a dragon someday.
Yeah, I have to imagine that I'm doing this stuff. It's like great actors. They can do that, but I'm sure it's not the same result if we were able to compare them side by side.
So I'm hoping.
I think it's worth it.
I'm hoping in the future with superhero movies that they learn to scale it back, or at least use it sparingly. Use CGI to enhance your characters. Use it to like show traversal and things like that. We don't need it for everything. We don't need characters to be made out of CGI all the time. That will take a while because I think for both, I mean, I don't know. That new Superman trailer did look like it was pretty toned down in that sense. Matter of fact, even the him flying real fast, people were like, "Oh, his face looks like it's CGI'd wrong," and he's in. James Gunn came out and said that's no CGI. That's just us making it look like he's with a fisheye lens. Like that's actually all practical effects. That's a good debate to have. I liked that, you know. His dog is CGI, but he's actually laying down in some fake snow and stuff. Like that's real. So I think maybe DC will start off with lower CGI stuff, and Marvel will definitely have to take some time because the next two gigantic tentpole projects they got coming up, we already know is filming on full green screen. So I'm hoping that those like that Ant-Man was so hard to watch. Quantumania one,
too much. Yeah,
Way
and
too much.
I don't want us to normalize like an oversaturation of CGI because
Right.
we already have to worry about technology taking over. It will not be hard for AI to completely generate an animated movie, without any actors involved and stuff like that. Should it be legal to do so at the time,
Yeah.
But then it's like, well, an entire industry will be destroyed, and we would be the ones that lose. Short term, oh, cool, all kinds of animated movies or all kinds of movies coming out that we like that are made overnight or whatever. But then the next year, all of a sudden, nobody's watching them. They're not making any money. It all gets shut down, and then we don't get any of the content we like. So
Yeah.
I definitely want to keep the industry healthy and keep people acting and keep it going.
One of the things that's changed since the like say the early '90s of superhero movies when they really started putting some cash in there is the fan. The first off the fan base in general, but also its influence on what they're watching. And I think today, the fans have far too much influence. There is a level of like, well, we really hate the way Sonic looks. That's a really bad example because that was a good,
That was a good choice. Yeah.
good choice. But then all of a sudden they change it based off the fans' experience or opinions based off something, a trailer that came out. You need to like let it be put into the director's hands, not at the studio's hands either. Like the studio, they have to pay, cut the check. But still, I think that there's something too where we're facing too much fan input. Is there a way to curtail that?
So for an example, I know I haven't seen it yet, but all the talk about Snow White and how the dwarves were, first the dwarves were too offensive this way, and then they were too fake this way, and like they were back and forth and delayed the movie so much. And it's like, well, if you just made it and you released it, and then you found out, oh, you know what, the dwarfs were kind of offensive, deal with the heat. Okay, that's how a movie is made. Yeah. Or maybe ask the right people from, in small groups, but don't put it out there on the internet for everybody to debate about and make it a big public thing. No, have a small group that you survey about how this, makes you feel, and then let that be part of your development process. But definitely don't let the whole world know what you're already working on and then, keep delaying your movie, because now a lot of people are worried to even watch it because they're like, well, it's been passed around and twisted and turned so many times.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't even sound like it's, going to be good. I want to go see it still, but I'm worried I'm going to see it expecting it to be bad and hoping it comes out, better than I expect.
It's so crazy. Going with a Snow White, for an example, they're having a problem because like the conservatives don't want the movie because Snow White's not white. And then the liberals don't want the movie because Gal Gadot said things about Israel and Palestine. So it's like, who's watching this?
Right. You didn't nail down any demographic in this.
Yeah.
So
it's going to be messy. But with that, I think one of the things we've seen Marvel change already due to the fact that the fans have too much influence is calling their shot 10 years in advance. Because we're still technically in one of those paths, but they're doing it less. They're not calling things out like, oh, we're going to make Secret Wars and then this, and here's what the next 10 years of movies look like. They're doing that a lot less now. And I think that's because the fan reaction to every little delay, to every little thing that comes out is so dramatic. They can't keep up with that.
Yeah. You made this like kind of promise to the people that this is going to come out, and then it takes a while to make it, and people are like, okay, well, I already know that's coming this year, so what are you doing next after that too? They count it as already sold, and it's like, well, hey, this takes a lot to do. We still needed to go out in theaters and make a lot of money so we can afford to make the next movie, so enjoy them. And I think that's a great presentation to have for investors, but definitely not to have for the general audience.
That's fair.
Each one needs to have its own hype celebration, a big release. Like, hey, guess what, guys? We're going Deadpool 7 and, make it a big event. Not mapping it out for the next 10 years. That just doesn't do them any good.
Yeah. Because even like with Captain America Brave New World, there were so many people saying, I'm not going to watch that one, but I'm looking forward to the Fantastic Four. It's like, no, stop. Watch what you want to watch, first of all. But then if you're looking for a Marvel movie, boom, give Captain America. Was it the best movie in the world? Hell no. But it was fun to watch. And that's kind of the reason you watch a movie. And, because people have so many expectations for what's to come, they'll not watch something. And that's a really good example with DCU. Is I stopped watching all the DCEU stuff immediately as soon as James Gunn got announced, and so like the new Flash and all that stuff like that, I couldn't care less because it doesn't count anymore. That's not fair to those movies at all. And I think I was kind of right, but nevertheless,
And people take for granted that Disney has so much money and that they're so secure, and MCU especially has been so stable, because with any other or most other like not industries, other movie producers, I guess.
Yeah.
If
Studios,
if studio, there you go. Sorry, with any other studio, if they had maybe 3 movies lined up that they're going to do back to back, and the first one didn't bring in big numbers, they would cancel the other 2. Yeah. So if you don't have people show out for this MCU movie, but oh yeah, don't worry, I'm gonna watch that one that's coming out next year. Well, you didn't go to the theaters, you didn't buy a ticket, neither did your friends, so that one was a flop, and they decided they're gonna cancel the next one that you were holding out to go see because obviously you're not interested in that kind of a movie now. So we in general, I think, take for granted that Marvel is just going to keep turning out these big movies because we see more down the pipeline. But if it seems like Iron Man 5 is the only movie they're going to make for the next 10 years, yeah, people are going to, I think, go out and watch it and enjoy it and
soak it in.
Yeah, and not take it for granted.
Last thing I want to discuss on this case is I think in the future, and we're starting to see a little bit of it. They tried it at one time. Now they're starting to do it again. Is mixing genres. Use the world of superhero movies or superhero genre really to add in other things. Let's go back to Daredevil. You could watch that as a hyper realistic crime drama just fine. The Penguin. If you did not know that Batman was in that world, you would not have missed anything. It was definitely just a Sopranos type show, and that is a really good way to spread your fandom. Our parents, we have the same parents, we're brothers. Everybody probably knows that at this point. They're over there watching Daredevil right now. And so I'm over there trying to explaining, like, Kingpin, he's this guy, this is the mayor. He's not normally the mayor and stuff like that. But they're loving the show because it's a really good story. It's not because of Daredevil being able to swing around or punch things and he's blind. It's because of the really cool crime drama stuff. So I think mixing genres is a way to really ensure that your base is constantly growing going forward. Yeah, and there's no getting stale too, by the way, on that.
That's a good way to put it. I think it becomes a much more appealing to the mass audience. And like you're saying, the 4 quadrants, rather than just the comic book fans or just the geeks that know about the character. Because like you're saying, if you don't know that Batman's in that Penguin world, it's like, it doesn't matter. Nothing is really about Batman or specifically about the Penguin comic books, or you don't need to know anything about it. It's a story being told fresh there. It's not dependent on any previous knowledge. So I think that makes it a lot better.
Let us know what you guys think about the future of superhero cinema. I thought this was a really good discussion. I think there's a lot there. And I mean, obviously, it's our week-to-week based conversation for the most part. I mean, like a lot of it, what we're talking about is Superman and Spider-Man and stuff like that. And so to see how it's shaping and going forward is important for us. So we want to hear from you guys too. What do you guys think of the future of cinema looks like?